Okay. Hi, everybody. A very happy World IBD Day to our listeners. Today we have Varada with us, who's going to share her entire journey. She's actually one
Can you,
of, sorry?
can you, I don't think we are live yet. Okay, we are live now. Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Can you start from the beginning? Sorry, I think there's a
no
lag on my.
worries. No worries. Um, Hi, everybody. Happy World IBD Day to our audience. We're going to listen to Varada's story. She's been kind enough to share her entire journey. She's one of, I think, the main. She's had a lot of, experience with IBD advocacy in the Indian context. So we're going to listen to her journey. Hi, Varada. Do you want to start off by giving maybe a little brief about you?
Hi everyone, happy IBD day. So I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was 15, and it was after almost 2 years of being sick. So I got sick when I was like almost 14, and then it took a while because, as we all know, it's not very common in India and it's difficult to get diagnosed. So I got diagnosed after a year, and then I tried multiple treatments, and after that I was on biologics since 2016, and I've been in remission since 2018.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let's go back a little bit to the basics. So you said that you were diagnosed almost when you were 14, or you started showing symptoms. So what were like some of the main symptoms that you saw and that took you eventually to a doctor?
So I was losing a lot of weight very quickly. I wasn't able to eat. I was feeling nauseous, and I had low grade fever for almost a year, and no one was able to figure that out. Most of the doctors thought it was TB because, again, TB is very common in India. So I got tested for that multiple times, but all the tests were negative, obviously.
Okay. All right. So what were your feelings throughout the entire process? You said that, so how long did it also take you from showing symptoms to actually getting your diagnosis?
Almost a year, I think around 11 months. So we went to multiple doctors in multiple hospitals, and most of them, they diagnosed me with FUO, which is fever of unknown origin. They weren't able to figure anything out because there was not a lot of swelling in my intestine at that point for some reason. But eventually, of course, it started increasing, and then I was finally able to get diagnosed after a CT scan. It was pretty hopeless, but I'm lucky enough to have a great family, and my parents were super supportive of me throughout the journey. So it was a mixture of feelings, both good and bad.
So you were in high school. You had probably just entered
Yes.
high school, and that must have been very, very like a big shock at that time, especially. How did you handle that, and what were like how did people respond when you were going to the hospitals and when you received your diagnosis?
Uh, I was pretty young, so all of my friends were also pretty young. So most of them did not understand what was going on. And they were supportive, like they texted me once in a while, but of course they were busy living their own lives as everyone is in high school. And that got pretty lonely. But eventually, when I was able to come back to school for my senior year, people were super nice. They were super supportive. They took care of me.
Um, that's great. That's also, so you had like a major gap as well from high school. I read one of your blogs. I was following up on CCYAN, and you mentioned that you kind of missed out on a few years of school.
Yes. So my school was kind enough to like sort of forgive my attendance. So they didn't really, as long as I was giving exams, they were okay with passing me. So I usually studied at home, and then I would, like, my teachers were super supportive. They would pick up my call whenever I needed help. They were there. So that sort of helped me not miss out on school, but physically miss out on school.
What was that entire experience like? Like now, not only were you dealing with like changes within your body, but you're also experiencing these changes in, like a different kind of like school setup. Now you were studying at home, you were spending a lot of time at home. And so like these were a lot of changes all at once. And how did you adjust? Like, what did you do?
Uh, Most of these changes were made because my body needed rest. So most of the time I was resting, some of the time I was doing my schoolwork. It did get pretty lonely, and I think that's why my parents got me a dog, which was nice. So she kept me company. And again, like I mentioned, my school was really supportive. So I could go for like half a day and they were okay with that. So I had sort of like a free pass to go whenever I wanted, which was really sweet of them because they wanted me to feel supported.
That's really nice. Yeah, I love like pets with IBD. I had a cat myself, so it's really fun. I like that portion of IBD, like the pets with IBD. Anyway, so your treatment, what was your treatment journey like? Like what did they get you started on after your diagnosis? And then
So the first medicine that I started on was Tempasa, and that helped me reduce my fever, but that wasn't doing anything for the swelling. Then they put me on steroids and slowly increased the dosage. But I had a lot of side effects, like most people do, and they got sort of out of control. And eventually, the steroids stopped working on me. So that's when we started with the biologics. Uh, at that point, we had the option to do either surgery or try out biologics. And my doctor recommended that we should try out biologics first and leave surgery as like the end answer, maybe.
like the ultimate step.
Yes.
So you mentioned that with steroids, you were having lots of side effects that were getting too overwhelming. Could you elaborate a little bit more on
I was having a lot of like mental health issues. I was having this thing called moon face, which happens when you have a lot of bloating and a lot of water retention. My other symptoms weren't under control. I was still having stomach ache. My weight increased, which was good. That was one good thing that happened. But other than that, it didn't really help me out a lot.
And again, this was around the ages of 15, 16?
16, yes.
16. All right. Yeah, that's a lot. Steroid is a very heavy medication, especially when you're in school. I can only imagine. Did it also have like impacts on your self-esteem because of like the physical side effects, the facial hair, the moon face, like you mentioned?
Yes, because I wasn't going to school a lot in the first place. And when I wasn't really very comfortable because of the side effects. And you're young, you are insecure about a lot of physical things at that age, and even today, but like more when you're a teenager. So that was also part of the reason why we wanted to stop steroids.
Absolutely. So how exactly, like, because again, you were at such a young age, like this is in school. So how were you handling comments? Did you receive any comments, unsolicited comments? Because that does happen in schools. And then how were you handling all of that? What were you telling people? How are you communicating your disease right at the beginning?
I wasn't telling people a lot of details about the disease because it is a complicated disease to understand. So I would basically tell them what an autoimmune disease is and leave it at that, because symptoms of IBD are also considered embarrassing. So, and it was really difficult in the beginning for me to accept it. So I wasn't telling a lot of details, and I did get a lot of unnecessary advice, maybe, and I would get really upset because I wasn't used to it at that age. Now I feel like we have thicker skin as we grow older, and the more time we spend with our disease, we get used to having advices that make like they don't make a lot of sense. But in the beginning, it was a little bit difficult, and I would get angry, and I would usually rant to my parents about it. But there wasn't much that I could do.
Right. Yeah, that brings back some memories for me. Okay, so So right now, so after steroids, you went on to biologics, and what was that transition like? And specifically, I want to ask you a question, just from my own experience of like whenever, because I'm also in remission right now, but whenever a flare up happens and I go to the hospital again, it's just very tiring and exhausting, and you start to, at least for me, like I start to lose a little bit of the optimism, right? So in that stage for you, when you had gone through like treatments with steroids and they weren't working, and then they were telling you, okay, biosimilars, let's go for that. What were your feelings? Were you still optimistic, or were you kind of like, oh, okay, let's just try it because the doctor is telling us, or?
I wasn't very optimistic. I had gotten a lot better, and I sort of had accepted that that is what my life would be at that point, because it had gotten better. But I feel like even my parents and my family had sort of accepted that that is how life with disability is. But things got a lot better after I started my biosimilars, and I got a lot of my normal life back. The process of starting that was pretty hectic because you have to get a lot of medical tests done before you started, because obviously they reduce your immunity like a lot. So I had to get a lot of CT scans done, colonoscopies, a lot of, I had to get all my vaccinations up to date. So a lot of tests. I was there for almost 2 weeks in the hospital getting everything done. And now I have to be very careful about, like when Corona happened, I had to be, all of us had to be very careful. And with TB, for example, I have to be very careful because of the certain medicine that I'm on.
Absolutely. And how long after your time with steroids did you start biosimilars? What age around?
Around 16, I started biosimilars.
Okay.
So I was on steroids for, I think, 6 months, 7 months, not a very long time, but my dosage increased a lot. So with
Okay.
steroids, what the doctor had explained to me, that they usually try steroids 3 times. And if they don't work, then they switch to another form of medication, which is what happened with me.
I see. Okay. And you mentioned also while you were explaining the transition to biosimilars that around that time, like your family and you yourself, you'd come to kind of accept this and accept the chronic aspect of this. So so this was around, again, like 2 years after you first started showing symptoms, right? And
yes,
what was that entire process like? Like in the beginning, were your parents, how were your parents doing? What was your relationship in regards to your illness with them? And then how did they kind of come to accept it, and you as well?
I think in the beginning, we'll both, like all of us, we were just fighting for the diagnosis. So that was mainly our focus. And then when I did finally get the diagnosis, we were sort of trying to find something that would work for us. So my father and I are very similar in the sense we tend to read a lot of stuff, and that sort of gives us comfort. And I think that's why I chose biotech as my major, because it just gives me comfort when it comes to my disease. So I remember my father used to just send me random papers, research papers on Crohn's and colitis and everything. And my mother also, like, wanted to get into alternative medicine, which I wasn't. I didn't agree with that, so we didn't try that. But that's something she researched on, and she was, because I had to. We have to have like a certain diet. She was mainly focused on, I think, getting me healthy in that sort of sense. So finding new recipes and making sure I'm comfortable at home. She took like 4 years off work to stay with me at home. So that was a big deal.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, where would we be without our caregivers? I feel like
Yes.
it's so underappreciated as well. That's interesting that you also mentioned that you were kind of like, yeah, no alternate medicines, because it's so loud, especially when you come and start to like tell people. I think the first thing that you notice is that so many people come to you and say, Ayurveda, yoga, like, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you tried going out in the sun? Have you? And it's just a lot of that. So that's very interesting that like you were in school and then you kind of like held your own and you said, no, I don't want to go for this treatment. What was that like, and how did you come to that
I
decision?
feel like because when I was getting diagnosed during that process, we did go to a lot of other doctors and other like sort of alternate medicine people, and I never agreed with what they had to say. So, and my parents were really nice in that way. They let me make my own decisions, even though I was a minor. They kept me in the loop. They never forced me to. I remember there was this one test that I did not want to do, this one medical test, because I was just tired of being in the hospital and I just wanted to go home. So they took a discharge against medical advice, which I don't know if that's the best thing, but I think that was the best thing for me considering my mental health. So they were really nice in that sense. They really kept me in the loop and they never forced me to do anything I didn't want to do.
Absolutely. That's really cool that they prioritized. I think it always comes down to like your mental health above and beyond.
Yes.
Like all the prodding and poking, and you're just kind of like a guinea pig in the hospital.
Yes.
Anyway, how did you come to realize your food triggers? Was it like very specifically organized, like you noted it down, or did you learn as you went through the process, or how?
I really tried tracking my food with like food journals when I was at the peak of my sickness, so 15, 16. But then slowly that sort of fizzles out because it's really difficult to do. Uh, I found out a few dishes that worked for me, so rice and curd and stuff like that. So I mostly stuck to them when I was really sick and I didn't try a lot of food. But once I started my steroids, because my appetite increased a lot, I did try a lot of different food and I figured out there were certain things that did not work for me. Popcorn, for example, I don't think it works for any of us. So I think I just tried them and figured it out as I went along.
Nice. Did you ever come across like now like food trauma that you're dealing with from the past, or certain foods that really had like a very, very negative impact on you and you're still kind of dealing with the consequences of like steering away?
Yes, definitely. I feel like I'm really scared to try new food. I usually just stick to the food that I know because I feel like remission is it's a really great place to be, but you're also filled with anxiety because you don't want to do anything wrong and lose it. So I'm always very careful.
Yeah, that makes sense. The anxiety thing is so real. So what was like in more detail, like the impact of your friend circle after diagnosis and then your new normals, like especially in school, I would imagine, and college thereafter as well. Like whenever they want to hang out, it's always like, okay, let's go to a cafe, or let's go to like, let's go to a club in college or something like that. So what was the impact? How did you handle that aspect? And yeah.
In school, I feel like I never had to tell anyone about my disease because I had gotten sick and it was like a very public thing in school. Because again, my school was a pretty small school, everyone knew each other, so they knew what was going on mainly. So I never had the choice to not tell people about it. So when I went to college, that was something that I was having a little bit of a hard time figuring out who do I want to tell and who do I not want to tell. And I was very private about it. In my first year of college, I only told my roommates in case of an emergency. And they were very sweet about it, very understanding. Um, and then slowly, I feel like once I started getting into patient advocacy, I was more open about it and I stopped hiding it. But everyone in college has been really supportive and really sweet about it. My friends sort of change their plans sometimes to fit me in, and I think that's really sweet and considerate of them.
That's really nice. You mentioned in school, like pretty much everybody knew because you took such like you took like an off. And so do you look back on it and regret that? Would you have wanted it to be more private? or do you not mind that and you think that it was actually helpful?
I think I wasn't in complete control of the narrative of what was going on. I don't think you're in complete control ever, but I feel like in college, still I had more control about the narrative and the story that was presented to other people. But in school, it was really out of control. There was some people that I would have preferred if they didn't know about it, because these were the people that I got the unsolicited advice from. And yeah, I would have liked if they didn't know about it.
Yeah. Specifically as well, like how did your teachers react? And if your assignments were late, like especially in the beginning while you were trying to find diagnosis, so you spent like almost a year without it. So you didn't have answers, like how were your teachers reacting? Were they taking it seriously or were they not? And yeah,
they were taking it pretty seriously. I had been in the same school since I was a child, since I was like 6 years old. My sister also graduated from the same school, so they knew my parents pretty well and they knew my family pretty well. So, and I had been a good student, so they did take it seriously. And of course, there were a few teachers who did suggest alternative medicine and stuff like that, but I had to understand it's not coming from a place of maliciousness, which I used to get angry about. But it's just what they thought, and it was their opinion.
right. And so, and then in college, you said so how did you get into advocacy? Like, and it took you some time to get there, right? So you spent like a lot of your childhood years kind of like just battling it and making like or coming to terms with it. And then when you entered college, I think, what did you start reading? Like, how did it all start? Where did it start from?
So when I was in school, my parents thought it was a good idea for me to go to a therapist, which it was. So I started therapy in school, and then once I went to college, I started going to the therapist on campus. And he was the one who suggested that I start a support group for people with chronic illness, which I said no to in the beginning because I didn't want people to know. And because it would be such a public thing and I was scared of it. But then he sent me a blog link to Natalie's blog, and that's how I sort of got introduced to it. I spent the entire day reading it, and it just made me feel nice. All the feelings that I had felt over these 5-6 years were like encapsulated in articles. So I sent her a DM on Instagram, and I spoke to her for a while. That made me feel really nice. And then I started following IBD accounts on Instagram. Then I found CCYM and I applied for the fellowship.
That's really cool. I was actually, just before talking to you, I was reading one of your blogs or your articles, and you mentioned like Natalie. I think it would be a good blog to link on this video on YouTube if people come across it. It's actually so good. And I resonate with that so much because I feel like when I first got ulcerative colitis, I felt so alone, right? Like you don't really know anybody else who has it, especially when you're a young adult, because it's such a 50-year-old to see like people in their 50s, like go get it. But then yeah, like the first person that you see who's actually like famous or who's actually written about it, for me was Hank Green, or John Green's brother.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I came across his YouTube videos and I was just like, I'm not alone. So it was really good. So did you also have that feeling of like feeling very alone? And like, I mean, I forgot to ask you, but like in high school, did you know anybody else who had something like this? And like, what were your feelings of like, am I the only one who has this? And how were you, like, did you feel that way at all?
I didn't know anyone else who had it. Can you excuse me for 1 minute? Sorry.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm really sorry. Someone came for my passport verification, so my parents, I had to go and sign a few documents.
No worries at all. Yeah, so I think you were in the middle of describing your advocacy, like journey, how you started.
Yes.
Or sorry, no, if you felt alone right at the beginning and like how you felt like you were the
Yes.
only one.
I did feel alone because I didn't know anyone in school who had any chronic illness. And most of the people I knew, like you mentioned, were older people. And I think I was the youngest person my doctor had diagnosed. Um, and there weren't a lot of places where you could meet or get to know other people who had chronic illnesses. Like I wasn't aware that there were like Facebook support groups and things at that point. Um, I usually just used to ask my doctor and my nurses, and they didn't know a lot of kids who had IBD. So that was pretty difficult when I was in school. Once I came to college and I finally decided to start the support group, it was with kids with chronic illness, not specific to IBD. So one of them has thalassemia and the other one has another type of autoimmune disease. So that felt really nice because surprisingly, like I was surprised, we had very similar problems, even though our diseases were completely different.
So what was the entire process like from the time that maybe like your therapist gave you the blog to look at to the point where you actually made like a whole group full of people who had these?
I think there was like a gap of 3-4 months. I was given the link to the blog in the beginning of Corona because I was really freaking out about it. And I think he just gave it to me to comfort me and to just um, make sure I was doing okay. And then I brought it up again because I had started therapy almost 1 year before that. And that's when he had suggested the support group, and I had declined the idea. And then almost 1 year after that, I asked him if he could do that. So we made a Google form and we emailed it across the university, and we got a few responses. And then we had our meetings.
And was that decision made in the beginning where you wanted to focus on like the broader sort of chronic illness instead of just IBD? You didn't go for like folks with IBD, please sign up. You made that decision to like actually include like a whole spectrum of.
I didn't think there were a lot of kids with IBD on campus. I think I'm the only one right now. So I did not think that a lot of people would join because of that reason. And I think that was mainly the reason that I wanted to do that. And a lot of places where we needed advocacy, whether that was like attendance or like extensions and stuff like that, it was similar for all of us. So I just thought that it worked out in that sense.
That's really cool. I just want to refer back to that article that you wrote, because you said as well in this video that like in the beginning you didn't want to reveal it to everybody, right? And that's a feeling that that is very strong in India, for various reasons. Like I think people think it's never a good idea to like say what you're dealing with publicly.
Yes.
So that transition from like where you didn't want to open up about it, and then you actually sent it out like a whole form and asked people to join and kind of explained your own condition. What was that like, and what inspired you? What was so strong? Like what feeling was so strong that it made you do that?
I think when I did not want to reveal it, I was having trouble accepting opinions from other people. I would get very bothered by what they had to say about my disease. And as I grew up, I spent time alone at home in Corona, I think. I got better at dealing with other people's opinions. about it and I developed a thicker skin. So that was one of the reasons. The other one was reading the blog. It just helped me out so much. And I just wanted to do that for other people as well, if I had the chance to. Because by that point, I had lived with the disease for 5 years, 6 years. So I feel like I knew enough to help someone else out. That was the second reason, I think.
Absolutely, that's really cool. So after that, you also interned with ORDI, the Organization for Rare Diseases in India. So how did you do that? How did you get started? And then what was that experience like?
So I was searching up on organizations which work with chronic illnesses in India before applying to the fellowship. I had applied to both of them around the same time. And I had an interview with the person who started it. And he asked me if I had any chronic illness. A lot of volunteers there are, caretakers. They're not really people who have any disease. So he was really interested in that. And I'm doing my minor in design, and they were just starting their newsletter. So I worked on the first newsletter that they released. So I helped out in that.
Wow, it's really nice. And has it been very helpful and rewarding, do you feel, to you as a person with IBD?
Yes, I think that was a good first step, both with the support group and with Audi. They were very good first steps because they were very broadly focused. They focused on a lot of different diseases I had never heard of. So it was really nice to know about them as well. But then I feel like with the fellowship, I wanted to get more IBD specific.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, great. What do you think about, do you have something to say to people who might be in that same position as you once were as well? And I think everyone who has IBD also feels this way. Like right in the beginning, we were kind of like, oh, this is something that we have to keep to ourselves, especially because like you also mentioned right in the beginning, the symptoms are so taboo to talk about. It's very hard to talk about this anyway. So do you have something specifically to say to people who might be like, oh, I don't really want to talk about it. Like, I don't want to, nobody really wants to listen to my experience and all of that. Do you have something specific?
I think I was very pleasantly surprised when I started opening up about it and how many people came to support me and people I had never expected. I always thought that the negative would outweigh the positive, but since I've been open about it, I don't think I've heard anything negative from anyone I know. So I think we're surprised by how nice people can be if you open up about it and how much support you can get. And it's really helpful. So I think it's a good idea to open up about it.
All right, great. Just two more main things that I want to talk about, and then we can move on to questions. I want to know a little bit more about your experience of living in a pandemic with this condition. And then you were also, I mean, there were lots of firsts, right? You were in college and you were dealing with it. You were on biosimilars, you were dealing with it. So what was that entire process like? What were your learnings?
When the pandemic started, I was really freaking out because obviously we were hearing about like comorbidities and lack of ventilators and just lack of medicines, and it really made me wonder where people with immunosuppressants stand when it comes to choosing between a healthy person and a person with IBD. So that was something that really freaked me out in the beginning of the pandemic. And then I always used to get my injections, even though they're subcutaneous, I would get them at a clinic or at the hospital. So my nurses were always injecting me. But once the pandemic started, my father started doing that, which was also an interesting process because he has never done that. He works in finance. He has no idea how any of this works. So that was also an interesting thing that happened in the pandemic that we got used to. And other than that, I feel both my parents had to work because they're in the government, so they never got to stay at home. So they were very, very careful about when they would come back home, about sanitizing everything, making sure I was in the other room, things like that. So that was very interesting. But eventually things got better once we got vaccinated. I got COVID in the second wave, and that was also pretty scary. I couldn't take any of the medicines that you take when you have COVID because my doctor recommended that I don't. But thankfully, he told us there were some clinical trials going on which were using biosimilars for COVID treatment because the steroids that were used in COVID were also immunosuppressants at the end of the day. So I got my injection and I was good to go, which was we were all very grateful for that. We were very scared about me getting COVID. And when that actually happened, it was a very scary thing, but I'm fine.
Touch wood. That's incredible. That's also I feel like that would have been a very high anxiety time for you. And since also anxiety is so connected with IBD, like it must have been like a spiral almost.
Yes, everyone in my house got COVID. So that was also very scary because, my parents were sick. So I had to take care of myself a little bit more and not rely on them as much.
Yeah. And so also, you mentioned that you got like an injection. Were you referring to the biosimilar or were you referring
Yes,
to
the biosimilar, yes.
Okay. So that's when you actually first started your biosim. No. You started before. But
taking it at home. Like usually I would go to a clinic and the nurses would inject me, but now I just, my father does the thing.
Right. Okay, interesting. All right, and one other thing that I wanted to talk to you or hear from you about was what was the institution's support to you specifically at your college? And if you don't mind sharing, could you share like where this is? And it's completely okay if you don't want to share.
So I go to college at Varada University. It's near Greater Noida. So it's an on-campus, like it's a resident program, which is something that my parents weren't really okay with. When I first started college, they wanted me to stay at home because of obvious reasons, food and stuff. But my university has been very great with all of this. So like I mentioned, the mental health professionals, they are amazing. And the admin has been very supportive. Of course, they need like medical documents and stuff so that they know you're not lying and everything. But once you go and talk to them, they're really sweet. Most of my professors, because again, I'm studying biotechnology, they understand the disease. So they are more considerate with extensions and deadlines when it comes to me. And I think it's just, I've been very lucky that my school and college, both of them have been very kind to me.
Yeah, I was just about to, so I think we can move on to questions unless I like suddenly remember something and then I'll keep you over here. But one of the questions was, you had strong support systems and not many patients have that in India always. So how important do you think they are and how do they contribute to your wellness?
I think the only reason I was able to go through so much was because I had a really strong support system. I don't know what I would have done without my family. But again, I feel like some people in my extended family weren't as supportive or they did not understand that disease. And that hurts a lot. But I think being open about your disease with maybe your friends or other people can help you get that the support system outside your family. if that's what's required. So I think maybe trying that out.
Yeah, and just a follow-up question as well, like out of all the different kind of support systems that we have, whether it's like institutions, our families, or our friends, like which one for you has been the most important and why?
For me, it's been my family because they have been there since the beginning, since I got sick. So they understand it more than anyone else. And they have suffered as well. You know, it's not easy being a caretaker. It's not, I was not in a state to advocate for myself. So my mother used to do that in the hospital for me. So that's not an easy place to be. And I think the only person who understands my disease, um, I think at an equal level, is my mother or my father. But I think other support systems are also pretty important because there's not much your parents can do once you're in college. Um, like if my college wasn't supportive of my food preferences or giving me extensions, there's not much my parents could have done. So I think all support systems are somewhat equally important in that regard.
In terms of institutions as well, like so I think an important point that you also mentioned was that as you're taking this biotechnology major, a lot of your professors have sort of an understanding of where you're coming from, so it kind of makes things a little easier. And maybe as a result, because they're being understanding, it spreads like sort of this message to other people to also like kind of look at it in a more empathetic way. But I'm wondering, like, what are your thoughts on institutions that are not always well equipped to understand something as rare? I mean, it's not really truly rare, but because it's unknown,
Yes.
what are your thoughts on that, and how would you handle it? Because you have like quite an extensive advocacy sort of journey already. So how would you sort of approach that?
I think it's really important to just sit down with people and try to get as personal as you can. Maybe like have a meeting with the admin, maybe your dean, and try to explain things and try to explain how long ago you were diagnosed and how difficult it is. And I feel like most people are good and understanding, especially when it comes to sick kids, because they are older than us and they do see us as like little kids instead of young adults a lot of times. So I think most of them are understanding if you sit them down and try to explain what's going on. That's the best thing that we can do.
Right. Okay. Okay, back to questions. What is patient advocacy to you?
I think it's just telling your story and hoping it helps someone else. And after you're in a position where you have sort of figured out your own disease, I think it's very important to help other people who are not as far along in their journey and stand up for them. And as you mentioned, a lot of people don't have that support system in their family or with their friends. And I think we as a community can be that support system for them. So that's why it's really important to me.
And I guess it's just a similar question. In what direction going forward would you want to steer your efforts? Especially from like an institutional perspective as well. Like, what do you think is quite lacking in our community that you would want to work towards?
I think in India, we don't have a lot of support groups. Like we have a lot of online support groups, but nothing with very regular meetings. And I think that's what Nikhil and I discussed, that we should maybe have like offline support groups in certain places, maybe once in 6 months or once a month, like figure out the details later. But because when I was diagnosed, like I mentioned, I did not know anyone else with this disease who was around my age. And now I know so many people who got diagnosed around the same time when I was diagnosed, and they are my age. And I feel like that would have helped me out so much when I was in high school. So I think that is one of the main things that I want to do in the future, is make more resources available offline for us and for our caretakers. I know my mother would have loved to speak to another mother. So I think it's very important for families and patients.
Right. And then, so you're also a 2022 fellow with, I should have said this in the beginning, you're also a 2022 fellow with the Crohn's and Colitis Young Adults Network. So what have been your learnings since January?
The meetings with the speakers have been really interesting. I did not have a lot of contact with doctors from other countries. So that was really interesting. And I did not know that. I thought 14, 15 was probably the youngest age where you could get diagnosed. But someone from 2022 batch of the fellowship got diagnosed when she was 3. So it was really interesting to find out how things work for people in other countries and how the medicines work and how messed up the insurance system is in other places.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to go back into your college experience, like there are so many aspects of now taking things into your own control. One of those aspects is like food. I mean, these are also out of your control in a way, like depending on where you're living. So how did you manage food?
Food was a difficult one because we have a dining hall and you just eat whatever they give you there. Like there's a certain menu and you can't really do anything about it. So I learned how to cook a little bit, and mostly the food was decent. Like they served the basic food which I eat, which is just like rice and dal and curd. So mostly it was fine, but when it was not, I used to visit home every weekend, or my parents would drive up there and they would pack food and give it to me, which was pretty stressful for them because it's kind of far.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I feel like where would we be without our parents? They're literally just like holding the fort. Do you think that you faced a lot of limitations because of IBD in terms of your career, in terms of who you thought you, or what you wanted to do, what you wanted to achieve?
Yes, I think so, because obviously I missed out on school a lot. And then when I was choosing universities, I chose one that was closer to my house compared to one which had the course that I wanted to get into. And then even for my master's, that's what's happening. I'm sort of confused between whether I want to stay in India or whether I want to go abroad. And with that, again, a lot of, because like biosimilars, they're not allowed in the US yet. So that's out of the question. And a lot of countries are just sort of eliminated because of the disease. So that is something that does bother me still, and that I'm trying to work on.
Yeah, and kind of just a follow-up question there, like, do you do you face like a lot of side effects even on biosimilars, things like fatigue or brain fog or things that were there in steroids?
They are a lot less, but I do experience some. So the day I get my injection, I have headaches and I do feel fatigue. And I think one of the side effects is it reduces your vitamin D in your body. So I have to be on certain supplements, and if I leave them, I do get really weak and I'm not able to work as well. So, but I think these side effects are something that I'm able to deal with compared to the steroids one, which were sort of getting out of hand.
Yeah. And also, so the side effects right now, do they take away from maybe some of your hobbies that you enjoyed as a kid, or have you found like new ways to kind of just enjoy some other activities now?
I think one of the things I got pretty lucky in this sense, I was never really into sports. I was always sort of an indoor person. So I think I got lucky in that sense, that I did not have to give up any hobbies as such. But I think it would have been pretty sad because I don't think even at my best, I don't think I have that much energy to, you know, work out or just do sports.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of bring out or talk about like sort of an ableist situation that goes on especially in colleges and then in the work sort of domain in India. Have you faced differences in like how you can perform in college, and then also like in the midst of it being such an ableist society as well? And how do you deal with that?
Yes, I think mainly how a lot of institutions work, it is very ableist because like a few weeks ago, it was like finals week at my university, and most of the kids, they were pulling all-nighters, they were just out all the time, missing meals, doing whatever. I couldn't do that because I would fall sick. So that's something I have to be very careful of. And when it comes to like group projects and stuff, I have to sort of nag my members sometimes and like make them understand that I can't be working at the last minute with so much stress. And again, anxiety, stress, it's all related to IBD, and it can lead to a flare up. So I try to avoid it as much as I can. So that becomes a little difficult. And then, of course, after finals week, everyone was partying. That also, like, there are certain moments in college where you do realize that there is a difference between you and healthy people, even if you're in remission, because a lot of times it's easy to forget. And whenever I feel like I've forgotten it, it has led to a flare up. So I'm very mindful of always remembering that even when I'm in remission.
Yeah. All right. So just a wrap up little question. I think you've answered this but we're just going to go over it again.
Okay.
How has IBD changed you as a person?
I think it has made me more considerate and more understanding, because I think all of us are like pretty self-centered. But when something like this happens, it makes you realize that there are things which are out of your control, and things that I think other people can help you with. So it has made me more considerate, and I've realized everyone has their own thing going on, and I should try to be as kind as possible to other people.
That's awesome. Nikhil, do you have any last questions, any last words?
Firstly, thank you both for doing this, and thank you, Varada, for sharing your journey and sharing your thoughts, and thank you, Nandini, for doing this, and I hope you had a good experience.
Oh, I enjoyed it so much.
One thing that I want to ask you both, like you both were diagnosed pretty young, and like comparatively, like me and others are now at least a decade ahead in our journeys, and times are changing, perspectives are changing. So and you also know that we started this organization and the foundation, and we're still figuring out what to do and what not to do. So like in terms of support, like two things that each of you would want, like two important things that you would want to see, either like policy wise or like but something that you believe would help people like you and children like you. And like Varda said, there are many kids like who have IBD, and like what do you think two things that we need so that, can help everyone, to not go through all the trauma and all the uncertainty and help them thrive actually.
Do you want to go ahead?
Okay. So I think one thing that I mentioned before is like support groups and just having a community of people who help you out, particularly in the early stages of being diagnosed, because I think that's the most difficult, accepting the disease and then figuring out your triggers and figuring out medication. And the other one would probably be, I think, some sort of help from doctors. I'm not very sure about particularly what kind of help, but when I was being diagnosed, for example, there were a lot of doctors who weren't able to figure it out, so they didn't believe that anything was wrong with me. They think I was making it up. So I think just that sort of maybe help from doctors, because I feel like maybe they would be able to understand it better.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just, I was about to kind of go on that as well. Like, of course, support groups are very much needed. I think well, I'm not sure if it's for most people. I think it's still a privilege that, there are people that we have families that can kind of support us and that can understand it and take it seriously and can also like advocate for us, especially when we're young adults and we can't necessarily like speak for ourselves. But also like institutionally, in my own experience, I've noticed like a big lack of awareness and also in a way lack of empathy in just like, because it's so out of the blue. It's like unbelievable when you first start to talk about it. It's like, yeah, there's no cure, there's no reason I got it. It's just this, my body's attacking itself. And it's almost like a joke. Like people just, they don't believe it. So I feel like having some sort of support groups in these institutions, especially because we also live in such an ableist system that demands, like Varada also spoke about, like it demands all-nighters, it demands, like caffeine and all of that, which is a big no-no for us. Having those to rely on and to maybe, because not everyone's good at communicating what's happening, so having those there for us. And then policy-wise, when I spent my time at Crohn's and Colitis Young Adults Network, we talked about like, well, it was the first time I got to know that like other countries actually have policies for people like us, and they have these cards, that you can show into a restaurant or wherever to like use their toilets or their bathrooms, and I think that's so needed. Just have like a policy, have those provisions in place, and just make your journey a little easier. Don't limit you and your experiences, because if, let's say, you want to go travel somewhere, that becomes really tough as well. Yeah.
I think, I don't know, today, like PGI, there's some offline event happening, and on Twitter it said that, they were launching some IBD cards. I don't know, like there was not much detail about any online thing, but yeah, I think this is like a very important thing, like to be able to convey to people that you have a condition, and for they may not be able to understand what condition you have, but they should understand, that this is the support you need and you need it urgently, immediately, at least, access to accessible toilets, or we have the toilets, but we don't get the access because people don't think, a lot of time it has happened in metros, like I want to ask for a seat, but I don't ask for it even when I'm sick and, I can't stand it. It's difficult to explain. And I would also want to ask you, Nandini, like just a question popped up, so like you are now working and everything. So like, how has that experience been? And, like how difficult is it to, navigate everything? And it's like a very prestigious place where you're working, and naturally, like how demanding is it, and how do you balance all that? How do you manage all that?
Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, I'm very thankful to the current place that I'm working, because the first place that I was like working was, it was really, I mean, I can't even begin to explain like how it did not meet my needs. I feel like people really did not understand where I was coming from. And there was just a very complete lack of not just awareness, but like empathy and like sort of like belief. So what's happening with this workplace is I'm still relatively new, but I'm really kind of enjoying some aspects because I feel like people don't doubt me when I like say that I'm sick. You know, there are structures in place because it's kind of like more structured than the first place that I was at. And so if I say that I'm sick, like people won't really question it. If I want to keep it to myself, people won't really ask me or probe or anything like that. But then again, like everywhere in the world, there's still that kind of fight. So people, I mean, structures themselves are not really made for us, right? Like when we're still working, like even able-bodied people, my like people working with me, my colleagues, they rely so much on caffeine. They rely on tea, coffee. It's like a running joke. Okay, go get your tea. We're gonna have like a big work session today or whatever. And I feel like I can't participate in that. And then also like what I've been noticing specifically with respect to my personal condition is that I feel like I blank a lot now. That didn't used to happen before. Even at the beginning of this interview, I completely blanked and I was just like, wait, what? And so I think that happens very often, and we don't have systems, or it isn't like that frequent in everybody for that to happen. So it becomes a little hard to kind of be productive sometimes when that sort of happens, when you start having brain fog and all of that. But what I really enjoy about it is like how forthcoming people are, and I'm very lucky. I'm actually lucky that I got to experience a not so forthcoming workplace, so that now I can experience, like, I can be grateful for this workplace in that sense. But yeah, I still feel like policies specifically centered to us, or just broader structures centered to our experience and how we perform, are still lacking all over the world. And we still need to work on that. Yeah.
Actually, I think, I don't know if Varda knows, but like these, especially in India, like the organizations that work with people with disabilities, the legal disabilities, which are in the RPW, which is like a very short list comparatively to other countries. But then even, they are like fighting the same fight of like awareness, and even like they say, that there's not enough effort. So like we are so very far behind that, and people have to grasp that concept first, and then they can, really think about invisible disabilities. So they do these kind of like corporate sensitization programs. So like maybe that's what's needed in our case too. Also, to what the last question is like, so you are in biotech, right? And like you said, you have a lot of. So like, do you ever think about, like doing something related to like research related to Crohn's or IBD or anything?
Yes, that's why I sort of got into it. And so in my fourth year in college, we have to do some sort of like research project. And my thesis, it's on epigenetics. So a lot of autoimmune diseases are related to genetics and epigenetics. And I took a lot of extra immunology courses because of this reason, to understand it better and to maybe work in it eventually.
I also know, like, I think, I'm very happy that like a lot of, the new people they are academically also, some work is coming out. Like there's one psychologist who's doing a master thesis. Nandini had an interview with her. So like that's an IBD. I think a lot of, that is coming out. So it's very nice to see. And I hope, like, what I actually like want to say to like you and everyone else is, or what I see is, people get engaged and then people kind of just, leave off. And, they have good careers, their disease is like, people like get remission, they have good lives, and they kind of forget the community. And then like, so I would really want you guys to try to stay involved in some of the efforts. And it's not necessary to like be involved full time, or even like, but like do something so that other people can also receive support, and uh, move forward in the journeys. So I hope that this wave of advocacy that has like started recently, it gets sustained because I'm really concerned about it getting like just damp down. So I'm really hoping that this gets sustained, and I really hope that you guys keep working, and at least in your own ways, even in this academic way or any way, you keep contributing to these things. Okay. Yeah, that's all from my side, and I think we're done. And thank you so much both for doing this. I'm personally very grateful, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
So yeah,
not at
good
all.
luck.
I feel so grateful myself to like have a chat with you both. And it's been, I mean, it's always good. I've never regretted like talking to someone with IBD because you just it's like therapy. It's so good.
Yeah, I think
Um,
every time, we had a talk with even Tanya, and she's from the UK, and she does not have IBD, but every time people with chronic illnesses talk, it's like, it's like therapy.
for sure,
Everyone
for sure.
therapy.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much. Thank you, Varada, for
Thank
kindly
you.
sharing your journey with us. And thank you, Nikhil, for the opportunity. And thanks
thank
to our audience. I think we'll link like Varada's articles and then also like your inspiration, Natalie, her
yeah,
blog. And yeah,
yeah, cool. Okay, bye everyone.
bye.
Bye.
Have a great night. Bye-bye.